Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Satsang Ji, welcome to the second series of Alcohol and Beyond. My name is Jaz Rai and I'm a recovering alcoholic. Many of you might have seen me before on the Sikh channel. My journey started way back in 2009 when I first came into contact with an organisation, a fellowship, service provider who helped me into recovery and taught me a correct way of living and a life that was meaningful. My life got way out of control. I started drinking at the age of 17. This progressed right into my late 30s. The impact it had on my family and the wider family, people at work, my colleagues, was quite devastating. In particular for my family, it caused a lot of anxieties, a lot of frustrations. My family didn't know who to turn to, who to speak to. But fortunately for me, I was suggested to go and see back in Nottingham. And that's when life started changing for me. Before I proceed any further, I'm going to give you an opportunity to listen to my story and then we'll come back and we'll speak further.
My name's Devinda. I'm married to Jaz Rai. We've been married for 22 years now. We've got 2 children. Our daughter's 19, our son is 14. We got married, we both worked full time, just normal, happy couple. Jaz drank socially at the weekends with his friends now and again, not every weekend. And we were happy, plodding along. But then into our marriage, he got made redundant and we decided to buy an off licence. Thought it was a good decision, good way of making some money, setting foundations for our family. But it turned out to be one of the biggest mistakes that he made or we made as a family. As when his friends would come to the shop, he would have a drink with them socially, but as his friends discovered the drink was free, so they would come more often. And the Indian thing to do, every time you have guests, you get the drink out. So with him, because his friends were coming constantly all the time, he was drinking nearly every day, sometimes more than once a day, depending which friends came at what time. We had our daughter. She was born, everything was fine, and because I was went back to work part-time, I started spending a bit more time with Jaz, and that's when we realised there was a problem. It wasn't just social drinking, it was more of a habit, as he would be drinking on his own, not just with friends anymore. As we kind of highlighted the problem to the family and they intervened, we sold the shop, hoping we'd break the cycle of him drinking and kind of get him back into normal society, just, you know, work. But it had gone too far by then, so he went to India for the first time. He'd never been to India before, thinking that it would be a good influence for him to get him away from his friends, from drinking. But he spent 4 weeks in India, and me and my daughter, we stayed at home while he was away. So, but when he came back, he got admitted to hospital. He was pretty poorly. We thought he just picked up a bug, but it was actually caused by alcohol. And that was the first time he got admitted to hospital for drinking. And then after that, the drinking got out of control. It didn't stop him after that incident. It just made him more determined to have a drink. The more anybody said to him, you shouldn't be drinking, you should be working, looking after your wife and your daughter, it had the opposite effect on him. So he would drink more. He couldn't hold a job down. He worked casually everywhere. He'd work for a couple of days, go on a binge, and then not go back to work. Or if he did go, he would be sacked. And it kind of carried on for a few years, and it kind of, family life was non-existent. If I went anywhere with family occasions, it would be me with my in-laws or with my family, with our daughter. He wouldn't attend, and because either he wasn't in a fit state or we would be worried about what he would do when he got there, if he would drink too much, upset people, because he was such a Jekyll and Hyde character. When he was drunk, he was quite snappy, irritable all the time, and when he was sober, he's a calm person generally, so you could have a conversation, but when he was drunk, he was complete opposite. So we wouldn't take him to any social events at all. But as time went on, and he'd been to hospital a couple more times, and he decided himself that he would stop drinking. At this point, we did kind of notice he had a problem with alcohol, but we didn't know what to do, apart from to tell him to stop drinking. And he did stop. He stopped for a whole year in 2000, and we had our son, which was a happy occasion. Everyone was happy that he'd sorted himself out. But as soon as his year was up, he started drinking again, and this time it was so much worse than the previous time. He'd get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, go to the off licence, buy a drink. So by the time we were getting to leave the house, he would come back drunk. And then because he'd already had his drink, so he'd sleep most of the day. So when we came back, the kids come back from school and I came back from work, he'd already be drunk, and he'd be loud and disturb the peace in the house. There was no peace, never any peace while he was drinking. And that was the hardest thing. And trying to keep a normal life for the children was the hardest thing. And I think without the children, I wouldn't have coped with it all, because I had to still be there for the children and have a normal life for them. It kept me going during the day, their tea times or their routines. It kept me going, and it kept the children going, kept them away from all the arguments. There wasn't many arguments, because it's pointless talking to somebody that's drunk because you can't reason with them. He would do the shouting, and we'd just kind of stay calm, or go to some family member's house just to kind of get away until things calmed down, or he would fall asleep, come back, bath the children, put them to bed, and then I would go to bed as well with them. And then he'd disturb us most nights, because he'd obviously slept all day, so he'd be awake most of the night, and then we'd have to get up again in the morning and go to school, go to work, and it kind of carried on. And then things started getting a lot worse as the children got older, and they started to notice, and it started to affect them. And that's when we thought, right, something's got to be done, because we'd have a couple of weeks of peace while he was in hospital, and he'd be all right for a little while when he came out of hospital, because his drinking would have calmed down. But then eventually, after a few weeks, it would start again and get to a state where he was just drinking all the time. He'd eat meals that we'd made, because when you make the evening tea, made food for him, and for breakfast I'd leave him food out as well. He'd eat now and again, not all the time, and it was an awful way to live. You can't describe how it felt living in a house with somebody that's drunk, and you and the children have to carry on as normal during the day. And a couple of times, we got him out of the house just because we couldn't cope anymore with all the abuse. And then you'd worry all the time, where is he, who's he staying with, Is he hurt? And then I'd let him back in, because I couldn't cope with the worry about what would be happening to him. And if something did happen, would the kids forgive me? If, you know, I didn't look after their dad when he needed me. So he'd come back into the house, and the cycle would start where he'd be shouting, causing trouble because he was drunk. But you know, everyone tried to help, family, friends, neighbours, but he wouldn't listen to anybody. And you know, so many times we thought there was a problem. He didn't have a problem with me, he had a problem with somebody else, but we found out later there was no problem. It was just the fact that he'd got into a habit and addiction with alcohol. And with the Indian community, nobody really talks about it, so you don't know where to go for help. And over the years, we got him, well, I took him to hypnotherapy, took him to AA. Nothing worked, because he always said he never had a problem, he wasn't an alcoholic. But just living with him, it was horrible. A couple of occasions when I took the kids and we'd, you know, just for a break at the weekend, catch up with your sleep and have a change of scenery. I had to go to my mum and dad's with the kids, just so that they could have a different change of environment, or something a bit happy, and get them back into their childhood. And we'd go away, and one occasion his brother came to check on him, and he was at the bottom of the stairs, drunk. So there was a open bathroom window. He climbed in and then picked Jazz up off the floor and put him back into bed. So even leaving him for the weekend was dangerous as well, because he was in no state to look after himself at all. But then I had to take the kids away. I couldn't subject the kids to it all the time. And I think it was about 2009, he went into hospital really seriously. And they did say, you know, if he carried on drinking, his liver wouldn't be able to cope with it anymore. And I don't know if that shocked him or not, because it didn't matter what we said to him before that. A gentleman called David came to see him in the hospital. He was actually from back in. And whatever he said to him, it kind of worked and made Jazz realise what he was doing to himself more than to his family, I think, because that's what the first step is, and what he actually did to himself. And since then, Jazz has stopped drinking. He went to regular meetings with Packing, and we kind of got back to a normal life, because I think the last time when he started drinking, just before he met Packing, I thought, right, I'm just going to help him stop drinking so that my kids will have a father, that you know, he's not going to be dead in some gutter. And then I'm going to leave him, because we couldn't cope with the abuse anymore. But as he stopped drinking, he became Jazz again, a calm person that you could talk to and have a conversation with, and would be there for his children. And he's been 6 years sober now, and family life is good. Everyone has their ups and downs, but you know, we can talk about them and go through it. So, and without Backing, we wouldn't have been able to achieve anything, because I don't know if Jazz would ever have stopped drinking without Backing. and that we'd still be a family. Life now, we go out for meals together, all four of us. You know, we go to every single family event, you know, go to my family's, go to my in-laws. We do everything together now. Looking back, it was, I'd be sat in a restaurant with just the children, just me and three of us together. There was never Jazz with us. And now we all four of us go everywhere together, and it's just a different. To be fair, I don't even think about the past anymore. Ever since anything before 2009, I just disregard. I don't think about it. Never want to go back there again. And I wouldn't want anybody else to go through this at all. So if you know anybody that's suffering or you are suffering, please ask for help. There is so much help out there. You know, without backing. I say backing because backing understands the community and the family issues that everybody faces, regardless of you being an addict or you just a family member or partner that's suffering because of somebody else's addiction. There's so much help out there, and please, please don't suffer in silence. There's always help. Just pick up the phone, you know, speak to a friend, and hopefully they can advise you. But please don't suffer in silence. Life it's not worth living like that. This is not what life is supposed to be about. Enjoying yourself and having love in your life, not having hatred or addiction, because that's not a real way of living. So please, please ask for help or just contact Backing, because they would be able to help you. Contact Backing or the Sikh channel, and they'll be able to help you and put you through. I hope my story's helped. It's made me go back to some dark times, and there were some dark times, but please don't suffer in silence. Contact Backing, Sikh channel, and I hope my story gives somebody some hope and I can help somebody through this. Thank you.
I hope you all appreciated that story, my wife's and myself's. That was my part of my journey, and some of the struggles my wife went through and some of the experiences she had to go through. So it wasn't just the alcohol didn't have the effect on me, but the impact it had on my wife and the kids. I want to welcome to you now Sohan Sahota. Welcome, Sohan. For the viewers at home, Sohan helped me along my journey and to help me get to where I am today. So welcome, Sohan, to the Sikh channel, and Could you just tell us a bit about yourself first? I know some of the viewers have seen you on the breakfast show here at the Sikh channel, but just give us a bit of an insight to you and how your journey started.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Yes, thank you, Jazz. Thank you for having me on the show today. And I can say a little bit about Backing. Backing was founded in 2003. It's a peer-led service. Basically what that means is people who've had addiction problems, they've come out on the other side, and they decided to do something, you know, wanted to get back. That's how the project was the service was set up.
Yeah.
It's people who are in recovery now. And, you know, initially there was 3 of us, you know, myself, Manjeet and Glaston. And the Backing kind of started as a small self-help group.
Right.
There's about, I think about good 10, 12 of us.
Yeah.
That's how it started, you know, small number of people, you know, wanting to support each other. And the only difference about this group was the culture, was the race and the ethnicity. You know, we want...
So you were all from the ethnic minorities,
That's
so
right,
to speak, yeah?
Yeah, from the African Caribbean community, from the South Asian, Indian communities, and also the dual heritage communities. So we went to other services, but we didn't get that connection. There was always something missing. But when we created Backing, we had that connection, that cultural empathy, that cultural identification, and also that spiritual connection. You know, we wanted to talk about our faith. We wanted to rediscover our faith.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes it was difficult to talk about that at other services or at other fellowships, because of the majority of the attendance would be Caucasian.
Yeah. Right. Obviously, you come across many people like me. I first walked through the doors of Backing in 2009. I still remember my first meeting in Derby. When you saw me, what was your initial reaction? Obviously, wearing a turban, Sikh guy.
I think initially when I saw you, Jazz, I mean, I looked beyond that. I had a sense of gratitude, you know, the fact that another brother has walked into recovery. Another brother who potentially will leave behind a life of addiction, a life of despair, and a life of chaos. And you know that dokonda, you know, that's that manu ada laga na besada biraya. The jindagi bakhsh jayegi. You know, your life will be saved, and it was good. It was exciting. You know, I felt really happy. But when a new person walks in through the doors of Backing, it's always a joy, because it's a chance for another life to be saved.
For me, Sohan, it was very difficult. It took me many weeks to get to that point. I'd stopped drinking in January, but it was March the 13th where I got the courage to walk through the doors in that meeting. My wife dropped me off. Even she wasn't sure whether I was going to turn back. But I made those first steps initially. For me, it was a massive relief when I saw yourself, a couple of other brothers I recognised from back in the day. And for me, it was a huge relief. For you, when you came into recovery, it was slightly different, because you wasn't as fortunate as I was, because I had a lot of familiar faces, if you like. But you were sort of, did you feel isolated?
Yeah, thank you for asking that, Jazz. Yeah, when I came into recovery nearly 20 years ago, I did feel isolated. I didn't have that cultural empathy, that cultural identification. I didn't have people from my culture in recovery at that time, you know, who I would have connected with. I went to the fellowship of other recovery fellowships, and I was the only Asian man at times in their meetings, and their meetings be really big. And if I wanted to share something that was relevant to my recovery, to my treatment, you know, that was important for my healing and development, if I shared that in a meeting, it wasn't always kind of received in a way where it was kind of left in the air, so to speak. But when we speak about some of the issues at the Backing meetings, you know, you feel supported. You know the people that you're talking to, they understand.
But you know, when you first started this group, your self-support group with all the different ethnic groups, how many Sikhs, was there a lot of Sikh people that came through the doors that you helped, that turned to you, someone, we need help?
I think at that time the word got out, you know. I'm from Derby. I left Derby one evening, you know, and came to Nottingham, and many months later, people started to find out, that I got clean. Someone's in recovery. There's a lot of people who assumed that I was dead because that's how far my addiction took me. I was a really, I was in really terrible shape. And some people thought I was in prison doing a long sentence because of with my kind of drinking and drug taking came the violence, came all the other kind of very kind of decadent sort of attributes, soul destroying attributes. So the word got out that someone is clean, and people started to find out, and then they started to get my number, because I put my number out there. If anybody needed help, call me. And that's the first bunch of people that we had were from the Indian community.
And obviously it was by word of mouth really that people found out Sohan. Everyone knew Sohan back in the day. When they found out you're making efforts to improve your life, they wanted part of it, didn't they?
They did.
We'll take a short break now, and we look forward to you joining us after the break. Satsangaji, if you want to know someone who's struggling with addiction, whether it's alcohol addiction or even drug addiction, then please contact the Sikh channel. You can ring the numbers on the screen and you can seek help, and you don't have to be isolated, you don't have to feel on your own. Help is here. Please ring the Sikh channel and the Sikh channel will put you through to us, and you can get help where needed. Sohan, after these group meetings, how did you all feel? Did you feel empowered that the people from your own communities are helping you?
I think in the meetings and after the meetings, there was a strong kind of sense of being a part of, a sense of belonging, a sense of kind of knowing there's a group of us here that we suffer from the same dilemma, and we all searching the same solution. And the thing that kind of stood out about it was everybody was honest. They spoke about how they felt, what was going on for them.
Yeah.
And that kind of transparency I never seen in my life. And I think with that level of honesty and transparency, it does bring you closer.
Yeah.
It's a very intimate way to communicate, because we live in a world where we always, I always hid how I felt. I always told people I'm doing okay. When I wasn't doing okay, I told them things are well when they weren't well. All was not well in my household, yeah? But that's the way I kind of...
We portray it.
That's we portray
That's how we're brought up and told to try and tell the world that, no, everything's fine.
Yeah, the first thing I would tell people is a lie. That I am okay, everything is okay, family's okay. But the reality is different. No. But in the meetings, we could speak in an honest way. We could say things are not okay. Yeah. There's challenges at home, there's pain at home, there's conflict, there's arguments, all of that, but we are in the solution.
Absolutely.
We're looking for a solution, and when we have faith that we will get through it.
Yeah. Satsangaji, we had the pleasure of speaking to Inspector Keane from Derbyshire Police earlier this week, and we're just going to listen to some of what Inspector Keane had to say and the impacts on the wider community, not just one particular community, whether it's the Sikh community or any other community, but what the impacts of alcohol and even drug misuse can have on the wider community.
My name's Richard Keane. I'm a police officer with Derbyshire Constabulary, currently based at Derby West. Been in the police service for 22 years now. I'm also the Vice Chair of the BPA, which is the Black Police Association.
Excellent. Could you just tell us a bit about your experiences with people that are drunk and their behaviours towards the police and society in general?
Alcohol and substance misuse cuts across every single nationality. There is no nationality or culture that is exempt from the problems of drug and alcohol abuse. It has been well documented that within Asian cultures, including the Sikhs, that sometimes alcohol abuse isn't perhaps spoken about. It's seen as it is a negative thing, and it's seen as such by families. So within that tight-knit community, people are less likely to want to confront these demons, for want of a better word, and challenge them for fear of bringing a perception of shame or some other such emotions on the family name, which obviously, if that is the case, can inhibit us being able to deal and tackle the problem.
Would you consider domestic violence and alcohol related?
Yeah, domestic violence and alcohol are very closely linked together. Many of the domestic situations that the police have to attend have been fuelled by alcohol, and I believe that people act in a very different manner with their loved ones when they're under the influence of alcohol. And I think it's fair to say that many or the majority of people will regret what they did the next day when they sober up and realise what they've done. Alcohol is very damaging. It damages families, it damages relationships.
Have you ever come across members of the Sikh community that you've had to go and restrain because of alcohol?
Alcohol and substance abuse cuts across all cultures, all nationalities. It doesn't discriminate dependent on what culture you're from. Alcohol does affect the Sikh community as it does with all others. We have been to the police in this area, which has had a high percentage of people from the Asian community living in it, including Sikhs. We have attended various quite violent incidents sometimes, which has involved Sikh families, and it is often the male has had to be arrested and taken away for the safety of the female partner and the rest of their family. Clearly, this is something that we don't like to see. It's not exclusively related to alcohol, but alcohol is a big factor, and it's just the damage that it causes to the families, the community, the neighbours. You know, it really does bring it home to you when you see these things, particularly for me personally, if there's children involved.
I hope you all appreciated what the Inspector Keane has to say and the impacts that alcohol can have on the society as a whole. And some of us need to realise the impact and the strains we do put on the police in our drinking. So you must come across a lot of people who get in trouble with the law, probably in prison. I know you do work in prisons, go and visit people in prisons, but surely the alcoholic or the drug addict must realise the impact he has.
No, Jazz. When somebody's caught up in their addiction, the last thing they're going to do is acknowledge what they're doing to others or society. Because addiction is such a condition where the person is going to think about the next drink, going to think about the next piece of drug to feed their habit. That is their primary concern. That is their primary preoccupation. It's only later on, you know, once they get arrested, they get locked up, they're in prison, they sober up a little bit, and that addiction gets broken a little bit. That's when they start to realise, you know, that their addiction is having an impact on sort of wider elements of their life.
Well, how do you feel when the addict actually acknowledges that he does show remorse and he does want to change his ways?
I think there comes a time when part of the addiction, you know, people go so far with it and they get to a point where they're so broken, so tormented and so desperate, you know, and then they reach out for help. They're the ones who say, look, I need help. But before that, it's everybody else is saying he or she needs help. When they get to that point, for me, it's like a blessing. For me, it's like really good to hear that. And it's like shocking. What do you mean it's good to hear that? I'm in pain. I said it's good to hear that because now you've got a chance. Now you've got a chance. There's a window of opportunity to reach that person. You know, and in that moment, initially there will be a lot of tears. There will be, you know, their head in their hands. Sometimes people, you know, they cry, really, really weep a lot. What have I done? You know, where has my life ended up? You know, I've hurt so many people. In that desperation, the self-centeredness of the addiction, it opens up a bit, and then the person starts to feel, like you said, the remorse comes through a little bit.
Yeah. So, Sangaji, if you know someone who is struggling, who is in this desperation, and who feels he can't get out of this trap, please contact the numbers on your screens. And you don't have to feel alone. The Sikh channel are here to support you, Backing are here to support you. You have all the support you need, and you don't have to feel alone. We are here to support you. The whole purpose of Alcohol and Beyond, this program, is to help our community, help people get back into the community and enjoy the life that they once had. So you must come across a lot of people, not just the addicts, but the families that suffer. We sometimes forget. I forgot the impact I had on my wife and my kids, my mother, my siblings, my grandma. You know, it's devastating for families. And do you have groups for the families?
Yes, we do. Yeah, we have a support group for the families, and I think as a community, Jazz, we need to recognise, because the main focus usually is on the one who is addicted, you know, the alcoholic or the addict. But sometimes we kind of neglect the impact that it has on families, on children, on parents, and psychological impact is very deep. You know, it's very troubling. It's very painful. So the family goes through like what's called, it's a condition that's termed as codependency.
Yeah.
You know, where the person or the family member that you're living with, they're constantly thinking about you. Their life is overtaken, driven by how you are, whether you're okay, whether you're safe, where are you now, are you lying, all of this. The whole day and night goes through that. And that is a terrible torment for a family member to go through.
But surely that person who's codependent, the emphasis must be just as important for them as it is for the addict, because they need time to heal. They need support. They need all this support that the addict's getting as well.
That's right. They need equally the same amount of support. That's why you have sort of family groups all around the world, all around the country. There are groups like, you know, you've got other fellowships, you know, like the 12-step fellowships for alcoholics, but you also got 12-step fellowships for families. And Backing has got a family support group, very similar, you know, that focus the cultural sides, especially the language is a big issue. You know, people can only speak, you know, in their mother tongue, and they need to be supported. And when you start getting like translators in mainstream services, a lot gets lost in translation. A lot of it. You only get 6 sessions, you know, and they're not going to be doing a home visits or phone talk. The thing about Backing is like, yeah, it's not like a job or an agency or an organisation. You know, it's a service, but it's like a mission. It's like a calling. You know, we support families, you know, all round the clock.
Yeah.
Home visits, evenings, weekends, you know, daytime, on the phone, and in the meetings as well.
Before we proceed any further, I just want to say that the new series of Alcohol and Beyond is going to focus on more experts, people in the medical profession. We're also going to bring you some case studies and give you a bit more of an insight into Backing. A lot of you will be wondering how Backing works. We will give you that opportunity to see how Backing operate on a day-to-day basis. What I want you to do now is listen to Bhai Amardeep Singh, who a lot of you are familiar with from the Sikh channel on a daily basis, and what Sikhi says and what Gurbani says about alcohol and other substances.
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ। ਸਾਧ ਸੰਗਤ ਜੀ, ਜੋ ਗੁਰਬਾਣੀ ਹੈ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਜੀਵਨ ਦਾ ਰਹਿਣ ਦਾ ਤਰੀਕਾ, ਕੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਖਾਣਾ ਹੈ, ਕੀ ਪੀਣਾ, ਉਹ ਸਭ ਕੁਝ ਦੱਸਦੀ ਹੈ। ਗੁਰੂ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਗੁਰਬਾਣੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਦੇ ਹਨ ਕਿ ਅਕਾਲ ਪੁਰਖ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਨੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਸਰੀਰ ਨੂੰ ਬਣਾ ਕੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਰਸ ਪਾਇਆ। ਸਾਡੀ ਜ਼ੁਬਾਨ ਖਾਣ ਦਾ, ਪੀਣ ਦਾ, ਬੋਲਣ ਦਾ ਰਸ ਮੰਨਦੀ ਹੈ, ਪਰ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਰਸ ਨੇ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਦੀ ਦਾਤ। ਪਰ ਕੀ ਖਾਣਾ, ਕੀ ਪਹਿਨਣਾ, ਕੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਪੀਣਾ, ਉਹ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਦੱਸਦੇ ਆ ਸ਼ਬਦ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ। ਬਾਬਾ ਹੋਰ ਖਾਣਾ ਖੁਸ਼ੀ ਖੁਆਰ, ਬਾਬਾ ਹੋਰ ਖਾਣਾ ਖੁਸ਼ੀ ਖੁਆਰ, ਜਿਤ ਖਾਧੇ ਤਨ ਪੀੜੀਐ, ਮਨ ਮਹਿ ਚਲੇ ਵਿਕਾਰ। ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਸੱਚਾਈ ਭਰਿਆ ਸ਼ਬਦ। ਮਾਏ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਉਹ ਖਾਣਾ, ਉਹ ਪੀਣਾ ਵਿਅਰਥ ਆ, ਕੋਈ ਫਾਇਦਾ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ। ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਹੈ ਕੋਈ ਚੀਜ਼ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਸ਼ਰਾਬ ਪੀਂਦੇ ਲੋਕੀ, ਸ਼ਰਾਬ ਪੀ ਕੇ ਮਾਏ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਉਹ ਖੁਸ਼ੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ, ਲੋਕੀ ਰਿਲੈਕਸ ਮਹਿਸੂਸ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਵੀ ਦੇਖੋ ਬਈ ਥੋੜੀ ਸ਼ਰਾਬ ਪੀ ਲਈ, ਉਹ ਰਿਲੈਕਸ ਹੋ ਗਏ। ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਸਾਧ ਸੰਗਤ ਜੀ ਲੋਕੀ ਸ਼ਰਾਬ ਪੀਂਦੇ ਆ ਜਦੋਂ ਕੋਈ ਮਿੱਤਰ ਆ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ, ਕੋਈ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਕਰਨੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ, ਵਿਆਹਾਂ ਤੇ ਸ਼ਰਾਬਾਂ ਵਰਤਾਈਆਂ ਜਾਂਦੀਆਂ, ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਲੋਕੀ ਬੜੇ ਖੁਸ਼ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਨੇ। ਪਰ ਗੁਰੂ ਨਾਨਕ ਦੇਵ ਜੀ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਇਹ ਖੁਸ਼ੀ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਬਰਬਾਦੀ ਵੱਲ ਖੜੇਗੀ। ਹੋਰ ਖਾਣਾ ਖੁਸ਼ੀ ਖੁਆਰ, ਖੁਆਰ ਦਾ ਭਾਵ ਬਰਬਾਦੀ। ਬਰਬਾਦੀ ਕਿਉਂ? ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਪਰਮੇਸ਼ਰ ਨੇ ਇਸ ਸਰੀਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਵਧੀਆ ਰਸ ਅੰਮ੍ਰਿਤ ਰਸ ਪਾਇਆ। ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਵਧੀਆ ਡਰਿੰਕ ਦਿਓ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਬੰਦਾ ਡਰਿੰਕ ਨੂੰ ਛੱਡ ਕੇ ਕੋਈ ਹੋਰ ਡਰਿੰਕ ਪੀਣ ਲੱਗ ਪਏ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਭਈ ਮੈਂ ਤੈਨੂੰ ਇੰਨੀ ਚੰਗੀ ਡਰਿੰਕ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਆ, ਤੂੰ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਛੱਡ ਕੇ ਕੁਝ ਹੋਰ ਪੀਣ ਲੱਗ ਪਿਆ। ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਬਹੁਤ ਬੁਰਾ ਮਹਿਸੂਸ ਹੋਏਗਾ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਮਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਫੀਲ ਕਰੋਗੇ ਵੀ ਮੈਂ ਇੰਨੀ ਮਿਹਨਤ ਕਰਕੇ ਮੈਂ ਇੰਨੀ ਚੰਗੀ ਡਰਿੰਕ ਬਣਾਈ ਆ ਤੇ ਇਹ ਇਨਸਾਨ ਬੜੀ ਮਾੜੀ ਡਰਿੰਕ ਪੀਂਦਾ। ਇਸੇ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਅੰਮ੍ਰਿਤ ਰਸ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਰੀਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੈ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਪੀਏ, ਉਹਦਾ ਆਨੰਦ ਮਾਣੀਏ। ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਵਧੀਆ ਰਸ। ਪਰ ਜੇ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਛੱਡ ਕੇ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦੇ ਰਸਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਫਸ ਗਏ, ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਹੁਣ ਸ਼ਰਾਬ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਆ, ਨਸ਼ਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਆ, ਮਾਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਇੱਕ ਇਨਸਾਨ ਆਪਣਾ ਜੀਵਨ ਤੇ ਬਰਬਾਦ ਹੀ ਕਰ ਲੈਂਦਾ, ਪਰਿਵਾਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਪਰਿਵਾਰ ਉਜੜ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਨੇ। ਜਿੱਤ ਖਾਧਾ ਹੈ ਤਨ ਪੀੜੀ ਹੈ। ਜਿਹੜਾ ਖਾਣ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪੀਣ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਮਨ ਪੀੜਿਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ, ਤਨ ਪੀੜਿਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ। ਪੀੜਿਆ ਭਾਵ ਪੀੜਤ ਹੁੰਦਾ। ਸਰੀਰ ਨੂੰ ਕਿੰਨੇ ਰੋਗ ਲੱਗ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ ਸ਼ਰਾਬਾਂ ਪੀ ਕੇ, ਨਸ਼ਿਆਂ ਕਰਕੇ। ਹੁਣ ਡਾਕਟਰਾਂ ਨੇ ਵੀ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕਰਤਾ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜੇ ਨਸ਼ੇ ਕਰਨੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਇਲਾਜ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਹੈਲਥ ਇੰਸ਼ੋਰੈਂਸ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆ ਉਹ ਫ੍ਰੀ ਮੈਡੀਕਲ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇੰਸ਼ੋਰੈਂਸ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਕੇਅਰ ਆ ਉਹ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲੇਗੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਸਰੀਰ ਦੀ ਨਜਾਇਜ਼ ਵਰਤੋਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਨੀ। ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਨਜਾਇਜ਼ ਵਰਤੋਂ ਕਰੋਗੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਸਰੀਰ ਦੀ ਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੇ ਪੈਸੇ ਲਾ ਕੇ ਆਪਣਾ ਇਲਾਜ ਕਰਨਾ ਪੈਣਾ। ਪਰ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਫਰਮਾਉਂਦੇ ਹਨ ਵੀ ਉਹ ਤੇ ਪੀਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਸਰੀਰਕ ਤੌਰ ਤੇ ਹਾਨੀਕਾਰਕ ਆ। ਪਰ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਮਨ ਮੈਂ ਚਲੇ ਵਿਕਾਰ। ਮਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵਿਕਾਰ ਭਾਵ ਬੁਰੇ ਵਿਚਾਰ ਪੈਦਾ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਨੇ। ਤੇ ਕਿਉਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਫਿਰ ਉਹ ਸ਼ਰਾਬ ਨੂੰ ਪੀਏ, ਕਿਉਂ ਨਸ਼ਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਵਰਤੀਏ? ਸੋ ਬੜਾ ਹੀ ਸੋਹਣਾ ਸ਼ਬਦ ਸੋ ਗੁਰੂ ਨਾਨਕ ਦੇਵ ਜੀ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਨੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਿਆ। ਗੁਰੂ ਨਾਨਕ ਦੇਵ ਜੀ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ has revealed this body is given to us by Vaheguru. We can enjoy different kinds of food, drinks, but do not drink those things, do not eat those things, don't use intoxicants by which your body is ruined and the corruption runs into your mind. A lot of people who burgle, who are thieves, who are murderers, they use intoxicants before they commit any sin. Why? People lose senses. So do not lose senses. Always remain in love of Vaheguru. That's the best wine. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
I hope Bhai Amardeep Singh made it clear to us all what Gurbani says, and there is no place in Sikhi, and the Gurbani actually explains that, and I hope Bhai Amardeep Singh Ji made that clear to you. So I think it's pretty clear to us all as Sikhs that nowhere in our religion is alcohol or any other substance that changes your mood or alters your mind is accepted in our faith. But one thing that strikes me is that sometimes our youngsters in particular that tend to think, even I used to think, that it's in our culture. I used to make up excuses. My son's birthday, Liverpool won, Liverpool lost, you know, all these excuses. but there's no place in our culture either for alcohol, is there?
I think in my experience, Jazz, it is quite often said that alcohol is part of our culture. It's in everyday communication. More is said, in that rather than what the Gurbani says. I think the Gurbani says exactly we are left with the consequences because we entered into that path, almost destroyed our lives, caused a lot of pain, it distanced us from spirit, from Waheguru, and then we suffered. We lived those consequences. So it is not part of our culture, but alcohol is a big part of our culture, at the moment.
Yeah.
And I think previous generations, I've only learned from the previous generations. If the previous generation said it's not part of our culture and I wasn't exposed to it, I think I would adopt that attitude.
Yeah.
And then the generation before that, I think there's a trail of generations, they were misinformed. I was misinformed. And there's no way I'm going to misinform my son.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Alcohol is not part of my life. It's not part of my faith, and it's not part of my culture. My culture is the culture I want to create for my family, the things I want to pass on to my children. But alcohol, I know what it's doing to people. It's destroying lives. I see it every day, what it does to families and children. I don't want it. I want to cut the chain there. For me, in my family, I want to cut the chain there. So our future generations, children, will know have a different awareness around alcohol and drugs.
ਸਾਧ ਜੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਹੁਣ ਸੋਨ ਭਾਜੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿਚਾਰ ਸੁਣਦੇ ਆ ਇੰਗਲਿਸ਼ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਭਾਈ ਅਮਰਦੀਪ ਸਿੰਘ ਤੋਂ ਵੀ ਸੁਣੇ ਹਟੇ ਹੋਣੇ ਕਿ ਗੁਰਬਾਣੀ ਕੀ ਕਹਿੰਦੀ ਆ ਕਿ ਸਾਡੇ ਗੁਰਬਾਣੀ ਸਪਸ਼ਟ ਇਹ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੀ ਆ ਕਿ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਜਾਂ ਸ਼ਰਾਬ ਹੋਵੇ ਜਾਂ ਕੋਈ ਹੋਰ ਨਸ਼ਾ ਹੋਵੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਸਿੱਖ ਧਰਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਕਬੂਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਆ। ਸਵਾਨ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਭੈਣ ਭਰਾ ਘਰ ਬੈਠੇ ਆ ਬਹੁਤ ਦੁਖੀ ਆ ਇਸ ਗੱਲੋਂ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਲਈ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਕੀ ਸੁਨੇਹਾ ਆ? ਸਿੱਖ ਚੈਨਲ ਦੇ ਰਾਹੀਂ ਉਹ ਇੱਥੇ ਕੰਟੈਕਟ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਵਧੀਆ ਉਪਰਾਲਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਆ ਜੋ ਇਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਅਲਕੋਹਲ ਐਂਡ ਬਿਯੋਂਡ, ਜੋ ਕਿੰਨੇ ਦੁਖੀ ਕਰ ਬੈਠੇ ਆ ਨਸ਼ਿਆਂ ਕਰਕੇ, ਕੋਈ ਡਰਗ ਕਰਕੇ, ਕਿਸੇ ਦਾ ਪੁੱਤ ਬਿਮਾਰ ਆ ਇਸ ਬਿਮਾਰੀ ਕਰਕੇ, ਕਈਆਂ ਦੀ ਧੀਆਂ ਵੀ ਆ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਲੁਕੋ ਕੇ ਹਜੇ ਰੱਖਦੇ ਆ, ਕਈ ਆਪਣੇ ਮੁੰਡਿਆਂ ਬਾਰੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਦੱਸ ਸਕਦੇ ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਭੁੱਲ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਕਿ ਕਈਆਂ ਦੀ ਕੁੜੀਆਂ ਵੀ ਧੀਆਂ ਵੀ, ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਲਈ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕੀ ਸੁਨੇਹਾ ਆ?
ਉਹਨਾਂ ਲਈ ਇਹ ਸੁਨੇਹਾ ਜਸ ਬਈ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਟੈਲੀਫੋਨ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ, ਈਮੇਲ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ। ਹੁਣ ਜਦੋਂ ਦਾ ਅਸੀਂ ਅਖੰਡ ਪਾਠ ਕੀਤਾ ਆ ਉਦੋਂ ਦਾ ਸਾਡੇ ਟੈਲੀਫੋਨ ਆਫਿਸ ਤੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਲੰਡਨ ਤੋਂ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਆ, ਬਰਮਿੰਗਮ ਤੋਂ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਆ, ਕੋਵੈਂਟਰੀ, ਸੰਡਰਲੈਂਡ, ਨਿਊਕਾਸਲ, ਕਈ ਜਗ੍ਹਾ ਤੋਂ ਲੋਕ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਆ ਕਰਕੇ ਉਹ ਡੈਸਪਰੇਟ ਆ ਹੈ। ਟੈਲੀਫੋਨ ਤੇ ਇੰਨੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਨਹੀਂ, ਜੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਮਿਲੀਏ ਮੂੰਹ ਤੇ ਗੱਲ ਕਰੀਏ ਫਿਰ ਗੱਲ ਗਾਹਾਂ ਬਣਦੀ ਆ। ਕਾਫੀ ਦੂਰ ਆ ਟੈਲੀਫੋਨ ਤੇ ਮਗਰੋਂ ਸਾਥ ਦੇਣਾ ਪੈਂਦਾ। ਹੁਣ ਕਈ ਮੁੰਡੇ ਰੈਗੂਲਰਲੀ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਆ, ਵੀਕ ਬਾਅਦ, ਮਹੀਨੇ ਬਾਅਦ ਕਈ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਆ। ਬਾਕੀ ਤੇ ਵੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇੰਨਾ ਕਿ ਸਾਥ ਮਿਲ ਜਾਵੇ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਦਾ ਗੱਲ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਦਾ ਗੱਲ ਬਣੀ ਜਾਵੇ। ਹੁਣ ਦੁੱਖ ਤਾਂ ਹੈਗਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਘਰਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ, ਬਹੁਤ ਦੁੱਖ ਆ। ਤੇ ਹੁਣ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਨਸ਼ੇ ਦੀ ਬਿਮਾਰੀ ਆ ਇਹਦਾ ਛੁਪਾਉਣ ਦਾ ਟਾਈਮ ਹੁਣ ਲੰਘਿਆ ਆ, ਹੁਣ ਨਹੀਂ ਛੁਪਾਉਣ ਦਾ ਟਾਈਮ। ਆਪਣੇ ਲੋਕ ਬਈ ਬਹੁਤ ਤੜਫਦੇ ਆ, ਤੰਗ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ, ਦੁਖੀ ਆ, ਮੌਤਾਂ ਵੀ ਕਈ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ। ਹੁਣ ਕੀ ਫਾਇਦਾ ਲਿਖਾਉਣ ਦਾ ਗੱਲ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਘਰ ਆਪਣਾ ਕੋਈ ਪਿਆਰਾ ਬਈ ਏਦਾਂ ਮੌਤ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਸ਼ੇ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆ ਜਾਵੇ, ਉਹ ਲਿਖਾਉਣ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੋਈ ਸ਼ਕਤੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਗੀ। ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਬਈ ਪਛਾਣੋਂ ਕਰਕੇ ਇੱਕ ਪਾਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਕਰਕੇ
ਸਾਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੁਣ ਸ਼ਰਮ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਭੁੱਲ ਜਾਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਆ। ਆਪਾਂ ਠੀਕ ਹੋਣਾ ਆ, ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਠੀਕ ਕਰਕੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਸ਼ਰਮ ਨਾ ਅਸੀਂ ਮਹਿਸੂਸ ਕਰੀਏ ਕਿਸੇ ਦੀ ਮਦਦ ਲਈ। ਇੱਕ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਹੋਰ ਉਪਰਾਲਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਕਿ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਭਰਾ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇੰਗਲਿਸ਼ ਨਹੀਂ ਬੋਲ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਇੰਗਲਿਸ਼ ਦੀ ਮੀਟਿੰਗ ਵਿੱਚ ਬਹਿਣ ਨੂੰ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਹੁੰਦੀ, ਪੰਜਾਬੀ 'ਚ ਉਹ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨੀ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਹੁਣ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਹਫ਼ਤੇ ਤੋਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇੱਕ ਆਪਣੇ 7-8 ਮੁੰਡੇ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਬਹਿ ਕੇ ਆਪਣੀ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਬਾਤਾਂ ਸਾਂਝੀਆਂ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ, ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਦੱਸੋ। ਉਹ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਿਉਂ ਕੀਤਾ ਇਹ? ਉਹ
ਅਸੀਂ ਕੀਤਾ ਬਈ ਹੁਣ ਬਈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਓਪਰਚੁਨਿਟੀ ਮਿਲੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਬਈ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪਹਿਲੀ ਬੋਲੀ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਆ, ਜਦੋਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਪੈਦਾ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ, ਰਿਕਵਰੀ ਦੀ, ਦੁੱਖ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ, ਖੁਸ਼ੀ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ ਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇੰਟਰਰਪਸ਼ਨ ਨਾ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਹੋਵੇ। ਹੁਣ ਜਦੋਂ ਮਿਕਸ ਮੀਟਿੰਗ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ ਫਿਰ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਟਰਾਂਸਲੇਸ਼ਨ ਕਰਨਾ ਪੈਂਦਾ। ਬਾਕੀ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਬੈਠੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਕਈ ਲੋਕ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਪਹਿਲੀ ਬੋਲੀ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਨਹੀਂ, ਆਪਣੀ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਫਿਰ ਇਹਦਾ ਟਰਾਂਸਲੇਟ ਕਰਨਾ ਪੈਂਦਾ। ਫਿਰ ਮਾੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਇਹ ਠੀਕ ਆ, ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਨਹੀਂ, ਪਰ ਜਦੋਂ ਹਨਾ ਪੱਕੀ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਦੀ ਮੀਟਿੰਗ ਹੋਵੇ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜੀ ਕਰਦਾ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ 'ਚ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨੀ ਆ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਹਨਾ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ 'ਚ ਵੀ ਬਣਾਉਣਾ, ਲਿਖਣਾ, ਪੜ੍ਹਨਾ,
ਹਾਂਜੀ
ਵੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਓਪਰਚੁਨਿਟੀ ਇਹ ਮਿਲਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਆ, ਕਰਕੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਵੀ ਗ੍ਰੇਟ ਫਾਇਦਾ ਮਿਲਦਾ ਤਾਂ।
ਨਹੀਂ ਸਹੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੈ। ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ ਸੋ ਮਚ। ਸਾਧ ਸੰਗਤ ਜੀ, ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਸੰਗਤਾਂ ਦਾ ਅਸੀਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਧੰਨਵਾਦੀ ਹਾਂ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਬੜੇ ਪਿਆਰ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਆਪਣੇ ਘਰ ਬਹਿ ਕੇ ਇਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੇਖਿਆ ਆ। ਮੈਂ ਫਿਰ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਬੇਨਤੀ ਕਰਨੀ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ, ਜੇ ਅਗਰ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਵੀ ਕਿਸੇ ਦੇ ਕੋਲ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਆ ਘਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਸੰਗੋ ਨਾ, ਸ਼ਰਮ ਨਾ ਮਹਿਸੂਸ ਕਰੋ। ਜੋ ਸਕਰੀਨ ਤੇ ਟੈਲੀਫੋਨ ਨੰਬਰ ਲਿਖੇ ਹੋਏ ਹਨ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਬਾਕੀ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਫੋਨ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ, ਸਿੱਖ ਚੈਨਲ ਨੂੰ ਇੱਥੇ ਫੋਨ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ। ਜੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੇ ਆਪਣਾ ਨਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਦੇਣਾ, ਇਹ ਮਹਿਸੂਸ ਕਰਦਾ ਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਜਾਣਦੇ ਹੋਗੇ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣਾ ਨਾਂ ਗੁਪਤ ਰੱਖ ਕੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਟੈਲੀਫੋਨ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ। ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕਦੇ ਇਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਮਹਿਸੂਸ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਕੱਲੇ ਆ, ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਸਿੱਖ ਚੈਨਲ ਦੇ ਭਰਾ ਬੈਠੇ ਆ, ਅਸੀਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਲਈ ਇੱਥੇ ਬੈਠੇ ਆ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਮਦਦ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ। ਅਤੇ ਜਿੰਨੀ ਵੀ ਜਲਦੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਟੈਲੀਫੋਨ ਚੁੱਕੋਗੇ, ਉਨੀ ਹੀ ਜਲਦੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਹੈਲਪ ਕਰ ਸਕੂਗੇ। ਮੈਂ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਫਿਰ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਆਪਣੇ ਵੱਲੋਂ, ਜਸ ਰਾਏ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਅਤੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਵੀਰ ਸੋਹਣ ਸਿੰਘ ਸਹੋਤੇ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ ਕਰਦਾ ਹਾਂ। ਗੱਜ ਕੇ ਗਜਾਓ ਫਤਿਹ।
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ।